Hello and welcome to All Aboard TII's Accessibility Podcast. This is a podcast about accessibility and sustainable public transport brought to you by Transport Infrastructure Ireland. I'm Claire Scott and I'm joined by our All Aboard podcast host, Sarah O'Donnell. Throughout the series, we'll be hearing first-hand accounts from people who use and design public transport systems, and specifically the role accessibility plays in these experiences. And who is this podcast for? In the first instance, we hope to connect with people with disabilities who use our services. But also, it's for anyone who is drawn to human interest stories and has a curiosity to learn more. And of course, we hope to attract listeners who are designers and decision makers for transport systems, who through the podcast might get a better understanding of some of the problems and potential solutions that are out there. So without further ado, let's give this a go and get all aboard TII's Accessibility Podcast. So Sarah, what's the focus for this episode?
Hiya Claire. So in Journey to the Future Part 2, we talked to Peter Bennett, Design Coordinator with the Dublin Metrolink project. He talks us through the proposed route and the design of the future stations, and he also touches on some of the issues and concerns that have been raised with the user group and how these are being addressed. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much, Peter, for coming in to join us for this interview to talk about Metrolink in Dublin. And we're really delighted to have you. It's a huge project. But before we get into the detail of it, maybe you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your role on the project team.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Sarah, for having me on. It's great to be a part of this great initiative and this great podcast in TI. My name is Peter Bennett. I'm the design coordinator for the Metrolink project. So I've been working on the project now for almost 7 years. Pretty much since the initial project inception, really, where we started to look at the initial routes, etc. So, throughout that phase, really, my role in the project has been to effectively coordinate the inputs of the many different suppliers, consultants, designers,
Sure.
advisors that we have on board, specifically around the overall design of the scheme. But also the operations, the coordinating with the architectural advisors that we have on board, and all of the other various parties that are engaged with the project over that past 7-year period. So,
Yep.
Yeah, it's
pretty big task. In fairness,
it's been a busy number of years, and it's only going to get busier as well. Hopefully, anyway.
Yeah, stuff. So, like when we were thinking about this podcast and what we wanted to talk about, we were, of course, hoping that it would appeal to anybody who's interested in the Metrolink scheme. But particularly, we were thinking that the audio format is really beneficial to people maybe who are blind or visually impaired, or who might ordinarily not be able to access the drawings and the documents as easily as others. So what I'd love to do is to paint an audio picture of this future project and to allow people to imagine what it's going to be like in the ground when it's finally built. So with that in mind, maybe if you could just start with a kind of a broad description of the route, where it starts and ends and what parts of the city it serves, and then we can start zoning in on particular stations.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. Maybe what I'll do is I'll start from the north and work my way down into the city. So at the very north of the line, we're starting in an area around called S1E8, which is very close to the junction to the M1, just near, obviously, Swords Town itself. At that stop, we'll have one of our only surface stations. So effectively, it's not going to be in the actual ground itself. It's going to be flat at the same surface. It's going to be also in proximity to a new park and ride that we're also establishing very close to the actual station itself, with accessible links and to allow for people to come from the park and ride into the station and vice versa.
Yeah.
Moving then further down south, so we come to one of our first major structures, which is effectively a bridge viaduct structure, which brings the line over the Broadmeadow River, which is just located there, just near the R1G2 road there, just along the near Swords Town itself. That brings us then along, if you can imagine, the R1G2, which is obviously one of the main bypass roads outside of the town itself, leading up to the M1 junction. That bridge runs along effectively the west side of that road, at which then we start to dive underground. And effectively what we're in is a structure called a cut and cover tunnel, which is effectively a concrete box below the ground.
Right.
Which brings us directly right under the R122 to come around to the east side of that road, which is where we come to one of our first stations, our first -1 level stations, which is Seatown, which is different from the estuary station, which is obviously at a surface level.
Yeah.
This station is at a -1 level, which means effectively we're down 1 level from the ground, effectively. Sure. And these stations are also open cut. But again, we'll get into the more detail of the stations when we come to the next part of this discussion. So from Seatown, we continue along the east side of the R122.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're in a combination of both that concrete box structure, or it could be an open box structure with no roof on it, effectively.
Yeah.
Which allows us then to obviously come beneath any roads that we need to come beneath, but also provide us any openings that we need for any operational reasons that we may need to have access to the top of the stations. That brings us down towards 2 other -1 level stations at Swords Central, which is very close to the shopping centre.
Yep. The pavilion is
Pavilion Shopping Centre.
Yeah.
So that brings that Swords Central Station, which is across the road effectively in very close proximity to the Pavilion Shopping Centre. We continue heading further south down again until we come to another -1 level station called Fosterstown.
Mm-hmm.
At which point we swap back over across the R122 again,
yeah.
Which leaves us on the west side, heading down towards the airport. So effectively, we're going down into the actual very first tunnel section that we're constructing for the project, and the very first underground station that we'll come to as we're going from north to south. So the first underground station is at the airport itself. So as I said, it's within an actual bored tunnel, which we're going to be boring from from either side of the airport effectively to allow us to come directly underneath the airport without impacting on any of the services within the airport or impacting on any of the operations of the actual airport itself.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, so the airport station obviously is going to be a critical station in the overall Metrolinx scheme, providing that connectivity to the airport that everyone's obviously fully aware of the Metrolinx scheme. But that will obviously be a critical station in terms of driving demand on the system, and also obviously providing that level of connection to the actual airport itself. And we're in very close discussions with DAA at the moment, obviously, to ensure that we have a solution that works for all parties and delivers that.
And that'll serve obviously T1 and T2 and all kind of future expectations for the airport.
Absolutely. And the aim is to leave as much flexibility as we can in the design to allow for future initiatives potentially to further improve that connectivity to the various terminals or various locations around the airport.
Yeah.
So leaving the airport station, again, we're in the tunnel bore again, all the way down towards the south end of the airport lands itself. So once we come out from the old airport road, which is just running at the south of the actual airport proper, that's when we start to come back over ground again. And in this area, we have a future station. So this is a station that isn't proposed to be initially opened when we actually start the operations. But it is a station that's there for future development.
And that's Northwood, is it?
That's the Dardistown station.
Dardistown,
yeah. And that Dardistown station, until we actually have it open as a fully fledged station, once the surrounding development provides the necessary demand that you would need in order to have a fully functional station in that location, it'll form part of the operations to allow it to get staff in and out of the depot, which would be located very adjacent effectively to the Dardistown future station itself.
Yeah.
So that depot obviously will contain all of the infrastructure, the buildings, all the storage areas for trains that we'll actually need for full operations of the Metrolinx system over the next 20, 30, 40 years. So it's we're effectively planning for the future really when when we're designing this level of infrastructure. So from the Dardistown area, we start to rise up again. And effectively, the reason is to get over the M50. So we're on a viaduct or bridge structure that runs over the M50, allowing the alignment to come back over further south. And then once we're over the M50, then we start to dive again.
Yeah, and underground the whole way then?
From that point on, then we're in a full tunnel structure.
Yeah.
So it's going to be obviously with the the density of Dublin city centre, you're ultimately going underground is the only real option there in that scenario. So, and also it provides us with that level of segregation that we need, given the type of system that we have, and we can talk about that a little bit more later
for sure.
on.
Yeah.
So we're now entering into the city centre. Our first station is Northwood Station, which effectively straddles across the Ballymun Road there and provides an entrance on either side of the station. And that was important, obviously, to ensure that we could provide connectivity to the station for areas of demand from both sides of that quite a very busy road, the Ballymun Road there.
Yeah. And again, looking at potential future development around that area.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that whole area is ripe for further development, for inclusion of housing, etc. And there's an awful lot of land banks up there that could be further developed. Obviously, there are plans currently in place to do so. But the arrival of Metrolink will obviously
accelerate that.
Exactly. Accelerate that process even further. So from the west side, then we're coming down until we hit the Ballymun area. And I'm not sure if you remember, there was an old shopping centre site.
Yeah.
That was located there.
Which is opposite the Civic Centre, basically.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think it's been recently demolished and cleared by Dublin City Council.
Mm-hmm.
But effectively, that will be the location where we're going to locate our next station, the Ballymun Underground Station. Now that development will be done in conjunction with whatever development plans that DCC have for the old shopping centre site itself. So
the idea is that you'll have an underground Metrolink station, but above ground, you'll have street level, and then above ground you'll have whatever Dublin City Council have planned for that site.
Yeah. And luckily, the way from our discussions with DCC, the two projects can sit independently from each other. So we're not going to be having any sort of clashes or major interfaces to have to resolve there.
Sure, but they'll be kind of combined in the future. Once it's all done, they'll kind of work as a piece.
Absolutely, yeah. So from Ballymun, then we're continuing to go further south until we hit our next station, which is Collins Avenue, which is just at that Collins Avenue junction there, just outside of the Our Ladies of Victory's Church there. That's located just near the actual junction there towards near DCU, around that direction. So the station there effectively will take us a large green piece of land that's just outside of the church area there. We're going to use that space to build our station box, and then effectively
reinstate the garden in front of the church.
Exactly, to maintain that sense of green space and openness. Effectively, that's currently there at the moment. So heading further south then from Collins Avenue, our next stop is Griffith Park, which is the next station along the line, which is again an underground station. This is located just in the grounds where currently Home Farm play a number of their matches and carry out the training effectively on some of the pitches. So we're effectively going to take the pitch area as the location for our station box. And effectively, we're going to reinstate the land over to return the pitch to its current quality.
And that's Nafina Club as well. Is that their?
Nafina are located just beside, just beside the location there. So this is the Home Farms location. So effectively using that site then as the location for the station. So moving further down then from Griffith Park, we're obviously getting deeper and deeper now into the city centre. But our next stop is Glasnevin station, which is a key interchange station for Metrolink.
Yeah.
So it's at this location that effectively ourselves and Irish Rail are going to effectively construct a station box for the Metrolink station, but also all the station facilities that would be required for heavy rail stations for Irish Rail. And what this will do, obviously, is provide a significant amount of integration between the heavy rail network and the DART Plus project, obviously, that the Irish Rail are developing. Yeah. For both the Maynooth and the Kildare lines.
Right.
And provide a single point of interchange then for people who are coming off those heavy rail lines and want to access Metrolink then to either go north or south down the actual spine itself.
Very good. And the station entrance is there by Crossguns Bridge beside the canal.
That's right.
And will there be a shared kind of Irish Rail Metrolink concourse as you come into the building?
That's the current proposal. Yeah, absolutely. And then you can make your decision once you're in there. Everything will be clearly lined out and signage will effectively be in place to ensure you can get a clear understanding as to where you need to go to get to what particular service you actually want to actually get to. So it's going to be that will be a key point of interchange, a significant driver of demand as well for the Metrolink system overall. So moving further south down, so again we're remaining in the tunnel. We're coming down towards Mater Hospital, and just outside Mater Hospital there's a small triangular park, Four Masters Park I believe is the name of the actual green space itself. And it's within that location then that we're going to be building the Mater station box and station. And it's quite a tight site. And obviously there's a lot of busy roads and a lot of consideration has been made for obviously any traffic in and out of the hospital especially.
Yeah, and you've got a mixture of kind of quiet residential streets then mixed with the busier hospital and,
That's it. Yeah. So that there will be a significant amount of challenge to ensure that we can construct this with minimal disturbance and interruption to the various residents around and the users of the road as well.
Yeah.
But once it's in place, I believe it'll be a massive plus and a massive bonus for the surrounding area.
And the little park is going to be reinstated, substantially once the Metrolink portal and station box is in.
That's it. I mean, the intention is to return it to as close as we can. Obviously, there will be some certain infrastructure that has to be constructed within that green area for the actual operation of the station. But obviously, our intention is to return it as much as possible as effectively a green amenity for the local people. So from Mater Station, then we're veering into the city centre. Our next stop is obviously a landmark stop, I think, for any metro system in Ireland is on O'Connell Street.
Yeah.
And the station box will be located just around the old Carlton Cinema site, around that section of O'Connell Street, up the north end of the street. Sure. There is currently plans for a development, a mixed development of both residential and commercial buildings to be located in around that area. So our intention is to construct the station box beneath that development, and then the development will take place above the actual station box itself. We'll have obviously a clear entrances to the Metrolink station from off O'Connell Street, and also there's an additional entrance to the rear as well as you're coming off from Moore Lane, which as part of the development is intended to be upgraded to some extent to ensure that we have, you can have a clear access between O'Connell Street
and it catches that kind of Henry Street catchment as well. People coming from that direction and they can come in through the Moore Street entrance. And of course you have the Lewis Green Line as well then on O'Connell Street. Kind of that's a point of interchange as well.
That's right. And effectively you could come off the Lewis Green Line stop there on O'Connell Street and effectively walk across the street and you're effectively into the Metrolink station then. So it's a very easily accessible. Exactly, yeah. So moving then further south then from O'Connell Street, then we're moving down towards Tara Street. And again, Tara Street is going to be an absolute critical interchange point for the Metrolink scheme. With obviously all the Irish Rail services running through Tara. So we are constructing our station just effectively adjacent to the Tara Street station itself, which will allow for initially a very easy walking interchange into the Irish Rail station or vice versa into the Metrolink station. We're currently proposing to sort of redevelop the area above the station box to provide an open space plaza area, which will effectively provide some level of open space and meeting areas expected for people, some opportunities potentially for some commercial development to take place in and around that area as well. But obviously, once we have the station constructed, obviously development will naturally follow, especially when you see the amount of demand that will be increased, obviously, by this key interchange with the Irish Rail system in this location.
Sure. And that plaza area, that's accessible mainly from Townsend Street and from Tara Street?
From both Townsend and Tara Street, you'll have access to it. And coming off the quays as well, you can access as well. Okay. So it's so from all sides
of that block. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, really important interchange with the Dart and, like you say, the other.
Absolutely. So from Tara Street, then we're heading down further south, and we're into Stephen's Green. Now we're located at the northeastern side of Stephen's Green, up around currently where the. I'm sure if many of your listeners are aware of around that side, but there's effectively a plaza area there already. There's a family memorial, and I think there's a Wolfe Tone memorial as well in that location. So we're effectively going to be using that location and that spot to construct the station. And obviously, there's obviously a lot of concerns wherever you're impacting on a national monument.
Yeah.
Effectively as important as Stephen's Green, especially.
Yeah.
But we believe we have the right mix of a location to be able to minimize as much as possible the impact on the park and minimize the amount of impact that we would have on the surrounding roads as well, which are key routes for public transport, for buses, for cars, etc. So a bit of a balancing act there, but
for sure, yeah.
It'll be. I think once the station has been established and operated, it'll effectively meld into the sort of surrounding area.
Yeah, and that corner is set back anyway, with the Wolfe Tone Monument kind of curving around on the corner of the gate.
Yeah.
So the kind of I suppose the scale of the plaza there will be more or less similar to what's there at present in terms of the forecourt to your Metrolink station will be similar in feel to what's there at the moment.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think the only difference is you're making that use of that space now as the sort of the plaza entrance to the station as well. Obviously, as providing that route
station
into the actual
and all of that.
Park as well. Yeah. And then leaving St. Stephen's Green again. Finally, we're heading further south down towards Charlemont. Where we currently, obviously, we have our Green Line Lewis running on the embankment around that area. We have the Charlemont Lewis stop there. And our station will effectively be located roughly where the current Carroll's building is located. There's a new development that's currently being constructed around the Carroll's building and in just behind it.
Yeah.
And our station will effectively be located within the grounds of that development, with an entrance just off Grand Canal.
Facing onto the canal.
That's it, exactly.
So that,
So Charlemont is effectively the current terminus for the station. Obviously, there may be potentially plans in the future to extend, but nothing has been decided as yet.
Yeah.
So, but our Charlemont obviously offers an easy interchange then to the Lewis Green Line services heading down towards Sandyford.
Yeah.
We have a stairs and a lift that'll allow for passengers coming out of the Charlemont station to access the higher up Charlemont Lewis station, Lewis stop that's located there. So.
Yeah. So you come out of the Metrolink station and just walk to where the current entrance to the Lewis Green Line is now, and take a lift up or stairs or whatever up to the Green Line.
That's it. Yeah.
That was a fantastic and very comprehensive description from north to south. It's a huge project and so many different elements, and
it is.
But that was a great description of it. And I suppose in many people's minds, when they think of Metrolink, they think this is a high-speed link to the airport. That's the kind of primary objective. But there are loads of other objectives with this project, and maybe you want to talk a little bit about that and what you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely correct. I mean, it will provide a high-speed, high-capacity link to the airport. But yeah, as you say, that's only one of many different sort of outcomes and objectives that we have for this project, and what this project will actually deliver ultimately when it's in operation.
Yeah.
I mean, Metrolink itself, I mean, it's effectively the single biggest investment in transport infrastructure in the history of the state. And ultimately it forms part of an overall integrated transport system, which effectively has been defined in various guidance documents for the greater Dublin area.
Yeah.
And that overall transport system also includes sort of systems that we've touched on, such as Bus Connects, the DAR Plus project, and a number of
future
other
Lewis lines,
Lewis lines, etc. So
Sorry, and all of the kind of, I suppose, future kind of growth in Swords and elsewhere. The kind of residential expansion of Dublin as well.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, I've read some statistics. I think at the last census, I think in 2016, I think we've had one recently, but in 2016, I think there was a growth in population growth in Dublin City as a whole of around 5.1%.
Yeah.
However, North Dublin itself saw a growth of 8% within that sort of same period. So you can see North Dublin is significantly growing. Swords is, I think it's now the second biggest town in Ireland in terms of the level extent of growth that it's experiencing as well. So you have the Swords area, you have North Dublin as well, which is
not very well served at the moment.
Not very well serviced at the moment, and requires something like Metrolink to be able to provide that level of connectivity, not just a north-south connectivity.
Yeah.
But a connectivity to all of these other sort of transport systems that are also going to be introduced or are being introduced at the moment.
And that they work together.
Exactly. So, we've been very cognizant, I suppose, in the design of Metrolink to ensure that, we do have these interchanges that can be made for put down part of the bus system, Lewis, Dart Plus, etc.
And I suppose, it's important to say that because it's fully segregated as well, and that it's high capacity but also high frequency, so that you can get that kind of constant running of trains that'll be able to move volumes of people.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, just to give you an indication, the Metrolink system is currently designed sort of a peak capacity around 20,000 passengers per direction per hour. If you compare that to say the Lewis Green Line, which obviously has been hugely successful and potentially over-subscribed in terms of the number of passengers in some peak periods, that system has been designed around sort of 9,000 passengers per direction per hour. So you can see it's a massive uplift.
It's a big jump in how many people
in the level of capacity to move down that sort of that spine corridor all the way down from Swords down into the city centre. Yeah, so it's
brilliant. Let's kind of try zooming in a little bit now and we'll try and kind of paint a picture of a typical underground station. So these would be the stations that really are between the airport and Charlemont, all of those tunnelled stations. Mm-hmm. And I mean, while there are kind of differences depending on the context, there are kind of similarities or kind of continuing themes and motifs, and the basic layout of the typical station doesn't change much from stop to stop. So I thought that maybe if we just took St. Stephen's Green by way of example, and imagine it's the early 2030s and Metrolink is up and running, and imagine you're standing with your back to the Shelburne Hotel looking towards the stop. Maybe, Peter, if you could just describe, what's in front of you and how a person will move through the station to catch the train.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. Yeah. So if you could imagine yourself with your back to the Shelburne, you're looking over, I suppose, at the northeastern corner of the Stephen's Green Park. And I think, as we previously mentioned, there will be a plaza area that's currently there at the moment. That plaza will be effectively also acting as the plaza area in front of the station box.
Yeah.
So obviously the key sort of factor for designing these plazas is you have a bit of a balancing act between ensuring that you have a wide open space that doesn't provide a constrained corridor to get into the station.
Yeah.
But also trying to ensure that it's clear for those, especially those with any sort of
vision impairment or
or any sort of such a disability.
Mobility.
They're able to navigate and orientate themselves towards where the actual entrance is.
Sure.
Without having to face a sea of clutter, etc. So that's going to be a key part of the design going forward, to ensure that we can maintain that clutter-free area for passengers to move through. So when you're looking in at the station, at Stephen's Green Station itself, again, hopefully you should be able to very clearly orientate yourself through the plaza area to get to the entrance of the station. And the entrance station, in common with all of the underground stations, is effectively a sort of a covered portal, if you use those sort of words, which provides effectively a visual clue indication as to where the actual entrance for the station is.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point, then you can effectively either use the lift down at which is in proximity and close by to the portal itself, or use the escalators or stairs to actually make your way down into the first level of the actual station. So once you're down into that first level of the station, I think the first thing you'll notice as you walk into the stations is a sense of space.
Yeah.
And one of the key lessons that we've learned from a number of other projects that we've looked at over the many years that we've been working on this scheme, is that sense of space. That effectively, if you feel like you're being constrained or you're some way sort of corralled or claustrophobic feeling that I've had in a number of different stations that I've been in around in the world, that sense of space as you go, especially as you go underground, is critically important. So the other critical important as well, which where we can achieve it, we try. Where we can't, we try to use other ways to bring bring this into the station, but is with light.
Yeah.
Stephen's Green will have skylights. Effectively, will allow it to bring natural light as far down into the station as we can. The intention is to try and get it down as low as possible. So in the day, effectively, you're getting lots of natural light into the actual station itself. So as you go down down the station, down into the concourse level and down towards the mezzanine level, again, hopefully that sense of light and that sense of space will provide a sort of you won't be so claustrophobic or so.
Exactly. And actually, what's nice about the stations is that because they're not so deep underground almost. You go to some London Underground stations, some of the older ones particularly, and they're very far underground. Whereas this is maybe, it seems to me, closer to maybe the Jubilee line. You've got a sense from the moment you enter the portal that there's a kind of a sense that you're not too far from the platform. You almost know it's obvious you're just a kind of a level or two away, and that there's, and like you say, the natural light is getting down. So you have that kind of logic and simplicity for navigating your way through the station. Yeah,
that's it. And I think that navigation piece, I think, has been, I suppose, critical. I suppose up to date in terms of how we've been trying to lay these stations out.
Yeah,
in some ways, obviously, we're trying to maintain as standard as possible an approach across the design of all of the stations. But as you say, there are some stations where you unavoidably need to
change things around
a little bit. But even for those stations, I mean, I think that some of the key design drivers really in terms of developing these stations has been to ensure that passengers, as soon as they enter the station, they have a consistent idea of how to get to where they need to go.
Yeah.
And as I said, because we are a sort of a single board tunnel where the tracks are side by side, that would lead itself to the fact that as it enters the station, then you have a platform either side of those tracks.
Yeah.
So it's very important, obviously, in such a station to ensure that passengers, when they're using it, passengers of all abilities are able to fully understand where they need to get to within the station to access the direction they need to get to.
Sure.
So that sort of clear sight lines as you're coming down the station to understand the platforms and where they're located and what direction they're going in. But also, obviously, for those who are, say, visually impaired, for example, who are maybe using a lift, for example, that needs to have that both the audible and the visual guides in terms of understanding clearly what they need to do to get to the station.
Yeah, so
the platform.
you'll have potentially on a lift, mezzanine level, a light here for, and that once you get to the mezzanine, then you're making a decision northbound, southbound, and you either go right or left.
That's
straight down to the platform. Is it?
Exactly. Yeah. So you can either stay on that particular lift that you're on to get to one platform, or you will have to make a change, as you say, at the mezzanine level, for example, to get to the other lift to get down to the other platform. So that to be able to have such a system in place, it's critical that you're able to clearly communicate to those people that are using that.
Sure.
Where they need to go and what they need to do in order to complete their journey.
Yeah, but a pretty, I think the navigation does work very well from, knowing the drawings and the design and all of that, that you do have that simple kind of progression, concourse, mezzanine, platform. And it's, like we were saying earlier, not too far underground and not too many long circuitous corridors or dead end spaces that you sometimes get in these systems. So,
that's it. And obviously not only as a general design point. I mean, having those clear sight lines, not having any corners or having clear passive surveillance of where you're actually needing to get to.
Yeah.
Can be a hugely important part of the traveling experience for many passengers for them to feel safe and secure and to know that there aren't any sort of corners that people can congregate in or that obviously was a critical sort of input in terms of developing design for these stations as well.
Definitely. So when you're on the platform, what will a typical platform layout be? Actually it's probably important to say that it's a driverless system, isn't it? So
yeah. So Metrolink will be obviously Ireland's first fully automated rail system, effectively metro system that we're putting in place. That sort of system while obviously there are plenty of other systems around the world that do have drivers that use platform screen doors, we will be using platform screen doors in our metro system, which is common with many new systems that are put in place now.
Yeah.
So these platform screen doors are effectively doors that sit just at the edge of the platform, that provide complete separation for passengers that are on the platform and the actual track itself and the tunnel environment and everything that happens the other side of the platform effectively. Yeah. So what happens is when you have one of these automated trains pull up to the actual station, it automatically aligns itself with its doors aligned to the platform screen doors, and the two open effectively simultaneously then to effectively almost act as an airlock.
Clear path or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. But I mean, these doors are hugely positive, I think, in terms of improving that overall sort of traveling experience. I know myself, being over in London, for example, on the tube, being at one of those busy stations, you're holding onto your child with your knuckles white almost, in terms of concern that they're going to potentially run out near the platform and tumble over or whatever,
Yeah, and just especially with the automated system as well, you just have that kind of efficiency. The train pulls in at as fast a speed as it needs to.
That's it.
And the doors open, efficiently and aligned and all that. And it seems to be working. Is it used in the Copenhagen metro as well?
That's right. Yeah. Copenhagen use them in their stations, their underground stations. The recent Elizabeth line that's opened in London also have them on a number of stations as well. So
tried and tested.
Tried and tested. But I mean, another key benefit, and I know this from personal experience as well, is especially where you have someone who can be very sensitive to noise and that vibration and rumble and the air that would typically come out of a tunnel, which is not always pleasant to get a blast off when a train comes in.
From London, all right.
So to have a separation from all of that, sort of the dirty end of things, if you want to call it.
And the wind tunnels and that kind of push that you get. So
it's a consistent experience no matter what station you're at. It's you don't have that loud noises. You don't have that sort of loud disruption as a train comes in. So it's a much more of a pleasurable commuting experience, rather than the noise and rumble, which you have to get used to in other systems.
And I suppose some of the feedback we've had through the user group is concern about, misalignment of doors or getting caught between one and the other. But of course, you maybe be able to assure people that the technology has been tried and tested on big systems across many cities across the world.
Absolutely. And I know there has been cases where this sort of system has been sort of retrofitted into existing metros, existing systems. And, in that scenario, you do sometimes have to make choices in terms of, such as the distances between the doors, the gap that many are concerned about, obviously, naturally concerned about when accessing these sort of systems. But I mean, again, one of the good things about having a greenfield project, a brand new project, is you can spec and design and spec to ensure that those gaps are minimized as much as possible.
Right down,
absolutely. And then there's all sorts of other, technical solutions to ensuring that you don't get that misalignment, because ultimately that's not where you want to be in terms of where the train is fully stopped, and it should be always fully aligned with those doors.
Sure. And just on the platforms then, so you've got the platform screens, screen doors, but generally speaking, what else will you have on the platforms in terms of furniture, and like how will?
Well, I think the intention is to try and keep the stations as clutter-free as possible, to only provide what we absolutely think we need to provide. So obviously you're going to have some level of seating available. You're going to have, screens, information screens, etc. But the key is to try and keep it as uncluttered as possible. So only what is necessary should be really on the platform level itself. And to keep that consistent then across all of the stations and as far as possible.
So when people go down, they have a kind of an expectation that this is the pattern of furniture, and this is generally where the help point is, and this is usually where the seat. Yeah,
exactly. Now, obviously, in some stations, it's not possible to have full coordination and consistency between, for example, where the escalators are compared to, or where the lifts are. There may be some call to, in some of those stations, to have
change
alternative locations. But the key point here is really to ensure that passengers can find those facilities.
Yeah.
They're clearly signposted. They're clearly, set out and consistent in terms of how they're actually.
Exactly. And maybe judicious use of tactile paving to kind of guide towards the key, exits or the help points or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I know certainly easier than trying to get a consistent layout in the city centre where you've got like on street where you've got shop fronts and doorways and So at least with the underground there's a little bit more flexibility to get that consistency in place. Okay, so I mean that is a typical Stephen's Green could be said to be a typical kind of underground stop, and then you've got the open cut stops. So I thought maybe Swords probably represents a good example. Swords Central, is it?
Swords Central, yeah.
That probably represents a pretty typical open cut station. So how will that look and feel, and how will people navigate through it?
Yeah, I suppose to give you a feel of the station, maybe I need to, especially for these sort of -1 level stations, give you a feel of the sort of surrounding area as well. Currently, the R132 road that runs just in the outskirts of Swords Town.
Yeah.
It's effectively it's a dual carriageway. It's an 80 kilometre an hour dual carriageway road, effectively.
Yeah.
There's no. The only way to be able to get from one side to the other is to use a series of footbridges that are currently located along that road to be able to provide access to one side or the other, which obviously doesn't lend itself to any accessibility really in terms of being able to get to either side of this busy carriageway.
Yeah.
So we are working, the station that we will be locating on Swords Central will be done in the context of the fact that the R132 road will be effectively upgraded to become much more of an urbanized street rather than the dual carriageway effectively as it is now at the moment. So that there are plans to reduce the speed of that road to 50 kilometres an hour and to provide aquate crossings rather than having footbridges or any sort of a structure that needs to be navigated. Yeah. So this the aquate crossings then will obviously provide a much more of an easy access and accessibility in terms of getting from the Swords side of the R132 over to the other side, the eastern side, which is where the station will be located.
Yeah.
So as you cross over the R132, if you can imagine crossing at that aquate crossing to get over to where the station is, you'll notice obviously that there is, again, similar with many of our stations, there's a sort of a plaza area in front of the actual station itself. You'll notice there's bike parking facilities, especially at the -1 level stations of the north end. There's a significant amount of bike parking which we provided.
So will that be a combination of covered bike buildings or structures and then surface hoops and the kind of ones we're used to?
Exactly. It'll be a combination of both. Obviously, we're aiming to try and provide as high spec as possible in terms of the covered storage and parking facilities for cycles.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing that we need to obviously ensure is obviously that we have the space for cyclists to park their bikes and to use this change mode of transport to use Metrolink. But it's also critical to ensure that we lay it out in such a way that we can segregate from cyclists using the facilities and travelling to the station and parking their bike and those pedestrians who are using the footpaths, for example, to get into the stations.
Yeah.
And I know obviously there's been a bit of back and forth, I suppose, in terms of concerns about, and it's everywhere really, isn't it?
The shared spaces.
And
I suppose particularly, now that you've got e-scooters and faster bikes and everything, that there's Yeah.
So again, the aim is to try and ensure that the final design fully, as much as possible, and obviously you can't account for human nature, unfortunately, sometimes, but to try and to push the cyclists and all of this sort of traffic away from pedestrians to keep, to provide at least that level of
kind
confidence.
Clear and safe paths where possible, and using kind of landscape features or whatever.
That's it. And that'll form a large part, I suppose, of the sort of plaza area in front of these stations to be landscaping interventions to both obviously to act as an aesthetic, but also to be functional in terms of, providing a direction or preventing from, pedestrians and cyclists from mixing, especially as you're entering into that station area. Yeah. So as you were approaching the front of the station, again, you're effectively you're starting to see a lot of the same features that you would when you look at the station from the city centre. The key difference here, obviously, we're at a -1 level station. We don't have a closed box, effectively, like a station box. Effectively, the top of the box has been taken off. And instead, what we have is a canopy that runs from the front of the station, covering a part of the plaza area, all the way to the back of the actual station itself. So we have a complete cover there to provide for environmental protection.
But if you were to look over the side walls, if it was possible, I don't know how high they are, but if you were, you'd be able to kind of see down onto the platform below.
You'd be able to see, exactly, yeah. And we'll have glazing, obviously, protecting and stopping from anyone from accidentally looking too close into the station box. But it's, absolutely. So it's a slightly different from the underground stations in that you have 2 lifts.
Yeah.
With the option to use either lift to go down the single story, effectively, to get down to your chosen platform, or use the stairs or escalators to get down into the mezzanine, and then make your choice as to which direction you want to go down in.
So from street level, if you want to go outbound or southbound, I suppose is how we describe it. You might go to the left side as you're facing.
That's it. Yeah.
And if you want to go northbound, you go to the right-hand lift.
Yeah.
And the lifts bring you straight down to the platforms, but is there a mezzanine for the...
No, typically you're going straight down to the actual
station. Yeah.
To the actual platform level,
from
from ground level, effectively. Yeah. So it's much easier, I suppose. It's a very simple approach, I suppose, in terms of you just need to pick your right lift to go to whatever your right direction that you're actually wanting to travel in.
Yeah.
But again, clear signage is going to be critical. The use of tactile is going to be absolutely critical.
Yeah.
There are a lot of these things that need to get right to ensure that everyone can access the system.
Yeah.
To ensure that level of consistency across all of the stations then as well.
But again, they're quite clearly laid out in their fundamental form, and that there is a kind of a consistent, a forecourt, similar architectural language, and then, pretty, as far as possible, pretty simple navigation. So
that's it.
Hopefully that'll work then in combination with whatever signage is needed, like you say.
Absolutely.
And that's great. And there are glass screen doors on the platforms there as well, obviously. And again, the kind of whatever platform furniture is in the covered ones will continue through. And again, same language, same layout as far as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, as you said, the key is to try and ensure that the platforms are consistent as possible. So whether you're a first-time user or a grizzled veteran of using Metrolink at that stage, you'll have a clear understanding of what to expect when you get off at the next stop, and the layouts, etc. Which obviously for those who are visually impaired is very critical to be able to clearly know where they are, I suppose, at any point in time.
Very good. And so, Peter, I know that you've attended many of the user group meetings where we have the kind of stakeholder engagement with people with disabilities, and how that works is that we give updates on projects, and we get feedback then on what it's like to use it on the ground. And we've had several Metrolink meetings which you've presented at and attended and everything. So you're very familiar with some of the concerns and feedback that we've been getting. So maybe I thought if we maybe touch on some of those, and like the concerns vary depending on the nature of the disability. So I think looking at maybe people who use wheelchairs or who have mobility issues, a big concern would be the capacity and the reliability of lifts.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of measures does Metrolink need to take to address those?
Yeah, I mean, from the discussions that we've had, I think we've touched on a number of the other concerns that have been raised. The
shared space.
The shared spaces, for example, the application of tactile, all of these things that absolutely need to be considered. The biggest ones that came on from discussions, and you touched on it, is in terms of wheelchair users and access to the stations.
Yeah.
So the current arrangement for the underground stations is that we have a single lift at the surface, which will either bring you down to one of the platforms directly, or you will need to make a change at the mezzanine level to access another lift on the other side to get down to the other platform.
If you're going in the other direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And obviously the concern is ultimately if that lift to the surface is out of action, then if you're someone who's in a wheelchair and needs the lift to access, then effectively that station has been effectively put out of action for you, really.
Yeah.
And obviously that's a huge concern. But I think it will absolutely be critical to ensure that when we actually have an operator engaged, that we have the strongest possible provisions in place to ensure that those lifts are considered to be absolute critical system for the actual overall workings of the station. So no different than a platform screen door. If a platform screen door isn't working, then that station is effectively, it's potentially not safe to use.
Yeah.
If we don't have a lift that can bring those passengers down into the actual station, then that would be, in my mind, a similar level of urgency required.
Critical urgency and no complacency.
Absolutely.
And there's a team out to fix it straight away or to...
That's it.
Yeah. And there are emergency lifts if need be. If there were ever a serious emergency, there are.
We do have it. There is a separate set of lifts that have been normally designed for Dublin Fire Brigade to access in the event of an emergency or an issue.
Yeah.
So, but again, if needs be, and obviously this is something that we need to tease out as we work in more detail, I suppose, on the scheme and develop our specifications and requirements.
Yeah.
There is potential there, obviously, in the case that we need to get people in or out of the station to use that emergency lift as well.
Yeah.
Especially for those who are within a wheelchair or otherwise, physically unable to bring themselves up the stairs or escalators to get out of the station.
Sure. But I mean, I guess from a day-to-day operations, it's the kind of highest spec, best customer service and all of that the lifts are, like you say, considered a critical part of the infrastructure at every station.
That's it. And I know at many of those user group meetings, the fact that this will be an automated service did raise some, I suppose, questions or concerns about, well, what about staff? Effectively, are we just taking staff out of the system effectively just to try and save money effectively? So, but I mean, ultimately, it's the opposite to that, really. By providing an automated system such as in use in nearly all new metro lines that are constructed nowadays, it allows you to actually focus more on the customer
service side of it.
Exactly. So rather than taking people out of the system, you're effectively using people more productively towards helping the passengers, helping our general customers, I suppose, in terms of their day-to-day commuting.
So you will have the customer service officers, I suppose is how you describe them, kind of going on board the vehicles and roving from station to station.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll have teams that will be roving through the stations, through the system. We'll have defined sort of response times for those teams to get to particular situations or to provide assistance. Absolutely, there's a lot of work to be done to try and get the black and white down on paper, I suppose, in terms of getting these specifications finalised.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the user group will be, hugely beneficial to be able to engage with them and to further on our specifications and requirements before we ultimately put it out to the market to deliver the system ultimately.
For sure. And just some of the other issues that have come up, I know that, set down and access, I suppose, whether you're interchanging by bus or whether you're being dropped off by somebody. Now, it's probably not that easy in the city centre to be able to set aside space for, immediate set down parking spaces or whatever. But I suppose, is it fair to say that it's at least been considered where possible and will be included where possible? Oh yeah,
I mean, we're looking to provide these, where we can.
Yeah,
and those obviously have been set out now in the design that's gone for a railway order. But I mean, you're 100% right. It's not always easy to actually find one of these set down locations. Especially when you're city centre in terms of density and the use of existing space there. It can be often very difficult to get anywhere really that's close enough to the station to actually constitute a set down area to get down. So, but where possible, absolutely, it's an intention to provide those wherever we can. Really.
And the changing places, that was an important policy document. Again, what can Metrolink do there?
Originally, we weren't intending to provide any toilets, and again, we're going back to 2015 here, 2016.
Yeah.
But you're right. The environment has changed so quickly over that 5-6 years in terms of what constitutes the facilities that absolutely should be provided. And these changing places facilities, I think, is obviously something that all of the city councils are now starting to buy into. I know Dublin City Council are introducing a number of these as well, on a rolling basis, effectively across the city. So currently, we're proposing, and we've built it into the designs as it is at the moment, to provide these changing spaces facilities at the main interchange stations, and that's obviously Tara Street, Glasnevin, the airport. I think also at the Park and Ride as well, potentially. So we'll have these changing spaces
at these key interchanges.
Which hopefully, and I suppose when you consider to get from the estuary, from the very north of the line down to the city centre, you're talking maybe 25, 26 minutes.
Right.
So we're hoping that, by providing these 4, 5 or 6 changing facilities along the line.
At intermittent spaces, it'll give you good coverage across the...
Exactly. Yeah.
And in terms of ticketing then, are there ticket barriers, or is it a completely open system? Or
it's currently proposed to be a completely open system, similar to Lewis, where you effectively can just walk up to the platform and get on the train.
And you validate your Leap card or whatever you do.
Exactly, yeah.
Or buy your ticket from well, if we're talking the 2030s, maybe.
Yeah,
they might be gone, but
I know that the NTA have a new next generation ticketing arrangement that's going to be in place, which will work with the NTA obviously to provide whatever facilities are needed there. But you're right. I mean, I think it's moving closer to just a sort of a tag on, tag off, validate your journey effectively sort of approach, rather than having to handle change and cash
and go through the barriers and all of that kind of thing. Yeah. The project was submitted to An Bord Pleanála in September 2022, just a couple of months ago, as part of the railway order process. And the observation period is closed, but I suppose it's important to say, and you kind of touched on it there, Peter, that, there's a huge level of engagement still to happen, really. It's, the process is really only beginning. Maybe if you wanted to describe the future process in terms of engagement with the Metrolink team and how that's planned to work.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. You're absolutely right. We've submitted now our application to An Bord Pleanála back in September, which feels like a lifetime ago now, been nearly March 23. So effectively that sort of line in the sand has been drawn in terms of our planning designs. But the planning design, the level of design we've got to at the moment is really the starting point, effectively. There is a significant amount of work to be done over the next coming years. More immediately, the next stage is to develop the tender designs and the tender specifications and requirements. And that's going to be a critical process in terms of ensuring that those requirements and specifications capture everything that we need to include to actually end up in the actual final system that's going to be built. So we would hope to work very, very closely with the user group from, for this next stage to get those requirements set in stone and get agreement across the table, I suppose, in terms of what we're actually proposing to put into this. And the rolling stock alone is going to be a significant piece of work. Absolutely. Let alone the rest of the infrastructure.
The buildings themselves. And of course, something that comes up very often is while the streets are being dug up and there are diversions and people who might be used to walking down a certain street, suddenly it's closed or they have to walk around hoarding, or their normal route is significantly disrupted. So that'll be another kind of focused piece of work as well, just to make sure that all of the contractors who are on site have really good awareness of, I suppose, the vulnerabilities of people with disabilities on the street.
But also, as you say, during that construction phase, to obviously keep on top and ensure that the contractors, meet their obligations and requirements in terms of maintaining accessibility and maintaining access routes around the city, effectively, as they dig it up. I think the only difference this time around, maybe compared to Lewis projects, is at least we're very much contained in certain areas. Whereas obviously with Lewis, you have the potential to whole streets that are effectively taken up with.
I mean, that's amazing, really, because you imagine with a project of this scale that it'll be, huge kind of chasms in the ground or whatever, huge amount. But so is that the idea that the tunnel boring is a kind of a neater incision and is slightly easier to manage?
Most of the work in terms of the route, will take place below the ground without impacting anyone. So,
that's amazing. Yeah.
From that perspective, it's a positive. But regardless, you're still talking about major interventions at certain points in the city that need to be managed.
And the station boxes themselves, that ground will be opened up and covered over it. So it's and then the sections in between it's tunnel boring and all underground.
Yeah.
We'll all be able to keep going, and then as though nothing is happening underground, and then it'll all will be revealed.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. And just should we mention the teams? I suppose a lot of work has gone in from Grimshaw Architects and from Jacobs and all the partners, and indeed from TII themselves, the in-house worker bees.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's been, a significant amount of work from across the board, from all of our suppliers, obviously, from not only the Metrolink team in TII, but across the board in TII. I think we've had input from, of course, from all the departments.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I suppose it's one of these projects that effectively, given the scale of it, it's unavoidable. We need to get everyone's assistance and to try and pull it through.
Pull on everyone's resources, yeah.
Exactly. So it'll be a great project for the city. It'll be a great project for TII, but hopefully it'll be a great project for the passengers, effectively, it's ultimately beneficial at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And actually what just struck me there is just in terms of ongoing communication, we're looking as well at a whole series of models, for, again, people to get a sense of those, the underground stations, the open cut stations, models, tactile maps, all of that kind of thing. Just
absolutely, and I think we're definitely the beneficiaries of the fact that across the water in the UK, they've just finished the Elizabeth line. They're in the process, obviously, delivering HS2 at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a huge amount of resources and lessons learned that we can build from these very recent projects.
Yeah,
and one of them, obviously, in Crossrail was, for example, having a sort of a mock-up of a platform area, which allows people to come in early and get a sense of space and understanding how eventually the final product will actually look effectively.
Yeah,
which obviously is hugely helpful when you're engaging with stakeholders such as the user groups.
Yeah, particularly when you get down to the kind of nitty gritty and there's a question of there's scope to change things, move things around, get it right.
Right.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Peter Bennett, thank you very, very much for coming in and talking to All Aboard TII's accessibility podcast about Metrolink.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
So that's it for this episode. We hope you enjoyed our conversations on disability and design and gained some insight into the role we can all play in ensuring public transport is truly for everyone. Thank you to our host, Sarah O'Donnell, to Trevor Cudden on sound, to the production team, Kathleen Jacoby, Rachel Cahill and Claire Scott, to Sinead Foley from TU Dublin, who designed our fantastic graphics, and to everyone else who helped make this podcast. Please send us your comments and feedback to allaboard@tii.ie. And for more episodes from All Aboard, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.